All right, good morning, YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another 5 rules for a big deadlift. So when it comes to building the deadlift, I was able to achieve a 500-pound deadlift in under 5 years. So these are just going to be the points that have helped me get to that point. Um, is that a pun? Does that count as a pun? I don't know. But anyway, so whenever I release a super long video like my last one, I really do try to balance it out by releasing a quicker video, like which for me is under 10 minutes. But let's get into it. So the first point that I want to make here is that you have to row. The reason why I really do think that rowing is super important when it comes to the deadlift or building the deadlift is the fact that you can recover much better from rowing than you can from deadlifting. At a certain point, like I would say maybe it depends on the person, of course, and it also depends on which style of pulling you do. I'm going to stick my flag firmly down into conventional. So when I say rules for a big deadlift, I mean a conventional deadlift. My sumo just kind of happened. I didn't really like think too much about it. I just kind of went in and said, okay, where's my sumo at? I realized it was very, very close to um, my conventional, if not stronger. So I was just like, okay, let me just stay away from it for a bit, just because of my biases. And there's nothing really bad about sumo, like if you are a powerlifter. But when it comes to developing musculature, I do think that there is a pretty big difference between the two. But when it comes to the deadlift, you're going to get to a point where you're strong enough that the deadlift starts taking more than it gives. And when that is the case, I think rowing is going to be one of your best bets. So let's say you row and then you do a lot of other direct hamstring work, whether it comes in the form of good mornings, hamstring curls, Romanian deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts. Easier to recover exercises that have high carryover in which that you use to do more volume work. That's what you got to do, and rowing is one of those things, and it just develops your upper back and your yoke strength, which is crucial to a big pull. If you struggle to lock out a deadlift, usually it just means your upper back is weak. And for me, I've always struggled off the floor just because if I can get the bar off the floor, I'm going to lock that thing out just because I really trust the strength of my upper back. So that's number one. You have to row. All right, number two, you need to train your squat. Now, I get it. If you are someone who really likes the deadlift, chances are you really don't like the squat. At least this is what I've come to experience in the people that I've talked to in my in where I've trained and where I've lifted. Either you really like squats and you're not the biggest fan of deadlifts, or you really like deadlifts and you're not the biggest fan of squats. You know, there are those people who are very like zen about it and are not too partial either way and train both or all of them just equally. Higher beings than myself who can actually do that. But no, me, I love the deadlift. Squatting is stupid, and that just kind of defined much of my training. But here's the thing: I got to a certain point where I just had hit the biggest deadlift plateau like I've ever experienced. For months, I was not able to hit a new single, even though I did a lot of volume work on other exercises, and it all came down to quad strength. I started incorporating front squats, high bar squats, and the safety squat bar, and really tried to get my squat numbers back up and got them up to a pretty good spot. And once I kind of felt like, okay, my squat is now a couple, like not a couple hundred, like it's now 100 pounds more than it used to be. Let me try to focus on the deadlift again, and boom, my deadlift went up. So sometimes what you are doing stops to work and you need to look where you least want to, and where I least wanted to look was the squat, and that's where I needed to most go. So if you are struggling with your deadlift and you've been putting so much effort into it, I want you to ask yourself, did I put a substantial amount of effort into my squat? Because when you are programming for yourself and everything like that, sometimes when you are focusing on a specific lift, other things take a place on the back burner. And when that happens, you might be either hitting it with maintenance volume or just minimum effective volume. And you are getting, like, you might be progressing, but it's not nearly to the rate that it needs to be to help your other lifts. So you have to squat. You got to row and you got to squat. All right, number three, you're going to have to learn how to program. So originally, this point was like the variation point. But I kind of covered that with the row portion. So I just had to put this in here. Deadlifting for most people is where I think people will get introduced to proper programming. Now, programming doesn't replace the need to work hard. But the reason why I say you need to learn how to program, especially with something like the deadlift, is because hard efforts can start to break you down, and it can start to weigh on your psyche a bit. And you start thinking to yourself, I'm putting in all this work, I'm putting in all this effort, how come I'm not getting any better? And then you start to think, maybe I'm just not cut out for this, maybe this lift just isn't for me. And I think that in that case, programming is the key, because I know there are a lot of people who have the greatest work ethic, but because they don't really have the proper direction, they end up going in the complete opposite way and then give up. So when I talk about programming, the main things I want to discuss are, of course, exercise selection. You're going to strength is strength, and that is super true, especially with the deadlift. So if you get stronger with a stiff-legged, a Romanian, a trap bar, a pause deadlift, a deficit deadlift, a sumo deadlift, like if you get strong, and I don't just mean 1 rep max strong, I mean like 5 rep max, 10 rep max, like sets upon sets, pushing close to failure with big heavy movements, it's going to go to your conventional or sumo pull, whichever one. Steve Shaw from Massive Iron, one thing that he did, and this is actually why I did sumo for a little bit. I know, like, this is a confession. Like, I did sumo. I'm tainted. I'm dirty. Like, I'm sorry, like, to disappoint you, and I hope you can forgive me for my sins. But I did do sumo for a little bit because I followed his advice, where every other week he would alternate between a conventional pull and a sumo pull. Eventually, I stopped that and I did a conventional pull and a trap bar pull. But it doesn't really matter. Strength is strength, and that's the main principle there. So that's why exercise selection matters. You're going to need to learn how to um, change up, manipulate. That's the word I was looking at. You need to learn how to manipulate volume and intensity. You're going to need to put in the volume because reps build strength. Now, intensity is, when it comes to strength, right? It's super important. But the thing is, are you displaying your strength? Are you testing your strength? Or are you building it? Now, you can't just build your strength using submax weights all the time, but they are going to be a big component of it, and you need to kind of understand the ebb and flow of going more voluminous at some points and being more close to your winter max at other points. And then the last thing is frequency. So for quite a while, I do think that a lot of people can benefit from a kind of primary deadlift day and a secondary deadlift day, where on the primary day, you actually do pull from the floor, and on the second day, you do some type of variation like a Romanian, a stiff leg, or something of that nature. Or you can just do exclusively variations, and then once in a while, or do a standard stance, whether that be sumo or conventional, or you just do like a speed day. That's pretty common, and they do work just to keep in touch with the technique. But that's one way of approaching the frequency. But there's also people who, let's say you're more size focused, or the deadlift just does not agree with your recovery. You can do an extended training week. So you can, rather than, I know it's really convenient to program for your week, but if you find that there's a lift that just needs a bit more time to recover, then you can do a 10-day split, a 14-day split, where you deadlift every other week, where you deadlift every 10 days, something of that nature. I know the every 10-day kind of approach is very popular with more hypertrophy focused lifters I've seen, but I also know that Alexander Bromley has done something very similar to that. So that's point number 3. And then point number 4, this kind of builds off of the volume and intensity portion, is that you do need to be patient. You need to periodize your training. So patience is the biggest thing when it comes to the deadlift. Just because the deadlift really tires you out, it really challenges you, and if and it's really and here's the other thing, it's really exciting. The deadlift is a super exciting lift because if you can lift a shit ton of weight, it makes you feel some type of way. It makes you feel like you're getting in touch with your ancestors in a way that doesn't turn you into a complete jackass. So the deadlift is a very fun lift. If you find lifting heavy to be exciting for you, you're going to run into the issue of, I just want to keep lifting heavy all the time. And I promise you that that's not going to work out well. One thing I talked about in my previous videos is that you want to always work hard, but never at the cost of future hard work. And that is especially true here. If you just prioritize lifting heavy all the time, but it prevents you from lifting heavier down the line, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, and I don't think that's a pill worth taking. So it's much better to just build up slowly. Start with a higher volume, lower RPE point, and then you build up into a lower volume, higher RPE, higher weight point. So you just have to build up. This is why when it comes to the deadlift, you do need to become a bit smarter with it. This is, and like I said, this is where programming becomes a thing. This is where patience becomes a thing. Because I'm not gonna lie, you can unga bunga quite a lot of things in when it comes to strength and size. You can literally do pull-ups every single day, get an impressive back and impressive pull-up numbers, and you'll be fine. Try that with a deadlift, and you're it's not gonna end well. So be patient, periodize. And then the last thing, this can apply to a lot of other lifts as well, but I think it's especially true with the deadlifts. You constantly have to work on your form. You constantly have to be mindful of what is working for you, how to cue yourself into a better position to make the pull more effortless, to make the pull more efficient for you. So there are so many deadlift tutorials out there in the world. The best ones that I've seen, Alan Thrall and Alexander Bromley are the two that helped me out the most personally. Um, Ed Cones was pretty good. And I'm not saying they're pretty good because, oh my, I could do something so much better. It's more like, well, I tried to do it as they did it, and it just didn't work nearly as well for me as another style. So I stick with that other style. That's all that means. There are people, or yeah, there are people, but everyone has different leverages. Everyone has a different way that their deadlift is going to look. So good form is not something that you can just assess through watching someone else do it and then trying to fit your body into that mold. You have to constantly try to make the pull better for you. Now, don't listen to all these internet armchair warriors who say like, "Oh, it doesn't look right." Like, stop listening to them. Does it feel good? Does it keep you safe? Does it keep you progressing? That's kind of like the most important things. Are you keeping balanced? Um are you avoiding any aches and pains? Like, these are more important things. Because quite honestly, if you are doing things properly, it shouldn't hurt you. Um at least as a general rule. But you have to work on your form a lot. So record your sets, record your reps, really be mindful about your setup. Have your own personal checklist of when you go up to the bar. I mean, Alan Thrall has his 5-step deadlift setup where you don't move the barbell, but that's kind of what I would want you to have here, because you can't just go in there with a Rocky Balboa kind of attitude and just accept any kind of punishment from the deadlift and think that you're going to come out on top. For this one, I would recommend that you train a bit more like Ivan Drago, where you have science on your side, and of course Mother Russia. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.